Caves are supposed to be explored and conquered. For most visitors, they're a guided tour with handrails and electric lights. But for 5 cavers at Jenolan, the mountain's underground maze became their eternal prison. Since 1903, over 200 cavers have required rescue from Australia's cave systems. At Jenolan alone, search teams have logged more than 50 major incidents in passages that tourists never see. From a superintendent who spent 3 decades chasing a phantom cave that consumed his sanity, to a solo explorer whose headlamp went dark in a passage no rescue team could reach, to university students trapped behind a wall of rising water as their air supply dwindled to nothing. But first, the man who discovered Jenolan's most famous chambers yet died searching for one that may never have existed. These weren't accidents or equipment failures, they were obsessions that pulled rational people deeper than safety allowed, into passages where the mountain decides who comes back. Case 1. The man who gave his soul to the mountain. From 1903 to 1932, in the limestone corridors beneath the Blue Mountains. James Carvosso Wyberd, superintendent of Jenolan Caves. Morning mist clung to the cave entrances as another search began. Wyberd was just 29 years old when appointed, a passionate geologist and explorer with an eye for detail that would serve him well in the labyrinthine passages. He's credited with discovering the Temple of Baal, the Orient, and the river caves, chambers that still draw thousands of tourists annually. A methodical mapper, he kept detailed diaries of every passage, every air current, every geological feature. But behind his systematic approach lurked an obsession. Wyberd believed in what he called the Master Cave, a massive extension that would connect the entire system. His reputation was built on discoveries, but his obsessions centered on the unfound. In his diaries, Wyberd spoke frequently of air currents that suggested vast spaces beyond mapped areas. Local Aboriginal stories mentioned chambers that breathed with the mountain. His surveys showed geological formations that should connect, but didn't. Colleagues warned him about solo expeditions into unmapped territory, but the cave system was still largely unexplored, with new passages found monthly. As the years passed, Wyberd became convinced the Master Cave lay beyond the tightest squeezes. He began exploring alone, believing others lacked his vision. His final diary entries described the calling from beyond the stone, a haunting phrase that suggests his rational mind was giving way to something more primal. He ignored safety protocols, venturing deeper without backup teams. Modern cavers following Wyberd's maps have vanished in tight squeezes he identified as promising. 3 separate incidents of cavers becoming trapped trying to prove his theories have been documented. Rescue teams found evidence of recent exploration in passages marked as Wyberd's targets. Equipment discovered in squeezes too tight for safe extraction. GPS, signals lost in areas Wyberd claimed held the master chamber. Wyberd himself died of old age, but his obsession claimed others posthumously. Modern explorers continue to risk entrapment following his theoretical routes. 2 cavers permanently wedged in passages they entered seeking Wyberd's phantom cave. The master chamber remains unfound, but the search continues to claim lives. Cave rescue teams now classify Wyberd's theoretical passages as no-go zones. His diaries remain in the Jenolan archives, still drawing obsessed cavers. Geological surveys confirm his theories were plausible, but unprovable. The Phantom Chamber has become Jenolan's most dangerous legend. Wyberd's legacy, brilliant discoveries shadowed by an impossible dream. But obsession wasn't the only killer lurking in Jenolan's depths. Case 2, the ancient mystery. Centuries before European settlement, in chambers sealed by time. An unidentified indigenous individual lost to history. Bones discovered in passages that shouldn't have been accessible. Identity unknown, forensic analysis suggests a young adult. They lived hundreds of years before recorded cave exploration. Likely familiar with the surface landscape but not the underground maze. Possibly seeking shelter, water, or following animal tracks into the darkness. Early European explorers like Jeremiah Wilson found bones in impossible locations, chambers that required technical climbing and rope work to access. No evidence of tools or equipment that would enable such access was ever found. Aboriginal oral histories spoke of people who walked into the mountain and never returned. This ancient explorer entered the cave system without understanding its complexity. They followed passages that led deeper rather than back to the surface, likely became disoriented in the absolute darkness. They chose to continue forward rather than retreat when lost, a fatal decision that sealed their fate. As they ventured deeper, passages narrowed and branched into a maze of dead ends. With no artificial light source to navigate the complex system, they were completely blind. Hypothermia set in as body temperature dropped in the constant cold. Dehydration and exhaustion compounded the disorientation. They died alone in a chamber that wouldn't be rediscovered for centuries. The body naturally mummified in the cave's stable environment. Remains were found in a seated position, suggesting conscious final moments, perhaps a final rest that became permanent. Death likely came from exposure and dehydration. Forensic analysis revealed death occurred 400 to 600 years ago. Bone structure and dental analysis suggested indigenous Australian ancestry. The discovery location required modern equipment to access safely, raising questions about how they reached such remote passages. The remains were respectfully returned to local indigenous communities for burial. Jenolan has been claiming lives for millennia, long before safety equipment existed. But even modern cavers with all the right gear aren't immune to the mountain's traps. Case 3, the experienced caver who trusted his skills too much. March 15, 1993, in the Greater Blue Mountains caving region. John Boer, veteran explorer planning a quick solo survey. Morning sun filtered through the bush as he descended alone. Boer was a 34-year-old experienced caver with over 200 underground expeditions under his belt. A respected member of the Blue Mountains Speleological Society, he was known for meticulous planning and a conservative approach to risk. He intended a routine 4-hour survey of a partially mapped passage. He left detailed plans with his caving club and was expected back by evening. The Jenolan Cave system was familiar territory for Boer. Weather conditions were stable with no rain forecast. He carried standard safety equipment and emergency supplies. His route was through passages he'd navigated multiple times before. Solo caving was discouraged but not uncommon among experienced cavers like Boer. His fatal decision came when he chose to explore alone despite club recommendations for the buddy system. He decided to investigate a side passage not on his original plan. He trusted his experience over established safety protocols. He believed a quick detour wouldn't compromise his safety margin. It was a calculation he'd made dozens of times before without incident. What likely happened next was that Boer suffered a fall or was struck by loose rock in the unexplored passage. His headlamp was found shattered, leaving him in complete darkness. Injuries prevented him from retracing his route to the main passage. His emergency whistle and backup light were damaged in the same incident, leaving him without means to signal or navigate. Boer died from injuries and exposure in a passage just 200 meters from the main route, close enough that he might have heard rescuers calling, yet too far to make his weak responses audible. His absence wasn't noticed until he failed to return that evening. A massive search operation involving over 50 cavers and rescue specialists was launched. His body was found after 3 days of intensive searching. Investigation revealed rockfall had blocked his exit route. Equipment failure compounded by being alone with no backup support proved fatal. His death led to stricter solo caving policies in the region. A memorial plaque installed at the cave entrance warns against solo exploration. Even experts can be overwhelmed when everything goes wrong at once. But some cavers face dangers that no amount of experience can prepare them for. Case 4. The caver who survived but never returned. August 1994. In the plug hole, Jenolan's most challenging adventure cave. A group of amateur cavers attempting the notorious S-bend squeeze. What started as an adventure became a psychological nightmare. Our subject was a 28-year-old marketing executive, a weekend adventure enthusiast seeking thrills beyond the ordinary. Part of a group of 6 amateur cavers, he had moderate experience with basic cave systems. Confident in his physical fitness and problem-solving abilities, the plug hole was meant to be his graduation to advanced caving. The plug hole requires abseiling and navigating extremely tight squeezes. The S-bend is a notorious bottleneck where cavers must contort their bodies to pass through. The group had basic equipment but limited rescue training. Weather conditions were stable, with no immediate external dangers. Local guides had warned them about the psychological challenges more than the physical ones. His fatal decision came when he entered the S-bend squeeze despite feeling claustrophobic. He pushed forward when his body began to panic. He refused to retreat when the squeeze became tighter than expected. He trusted adrenaline over rational assessment of the situation. The situation escalated when he became wedged in the narrowest part of the S-bend. A panic attack set in as he realized he couldn't move forward or backward. Hyperventilation made the squeeze feel even tighter as his chest expanded with each gasping breath. His struggles caused minor rockfall that further restricted the passage. His team spent 6 hours trying to extract him from the squeeze. He was eventually extracted alive but severely traumatized. He suffered claustrophobia so severe he couldn't enter enclosed spaces. Not elevators, not cars, not even small rooms. He required months of psychological therapy. He never returned to caving, couldn't even visit the cave entrance. The person who entered the cave never truly came back out. The rescue operation required specialized equipment and expert cavers from across the region. Investigation revealed the group was underprepared for the difficulty level they attempted. New safety protocols were implemented for plug hole access. Psychological support became standard for cave rescue victims. Sometimes the mountain doesn't need to kill you to claim you forever, but our final case shows what happens when nature itself turns against cavers. Case 5. When the underground rivers reclaimed their territory. March 1956, in the lower passages of the Jenolan River system. Members of Sydney University Speleological Society on a mapping expedition. Clear skies above ground masked the danger building below. The team consisted of 4 university students, ages 19 to 22, led by a 24-year-old geology student with 3 years caving experience. They were part of a systematic mapping project of Jenolan's water passages. Equipped with basic 1950s gear, they had no modern weather monitoring capabilities. They were confident in their abilities and familiar with the cave system. The Jenolan system is carved by underground rivers, the Styx and Jenolan, that can rise rapidly with rainfall. Heavy rainfall 20 kilometers away was unknown to the team. They had no radio communication with surface support. Weather forecasting was primitive compared to modern standards. The team planned a 6-hour survey of previously mapped passages. Their fatal decision came when they continued deeper into the system despite hearing distant water sounds. They ignored early signs of rising water levels inside passages. They chose to complete their mapping rather than retreat immediately. They trusted their knowledge of normal water levels over changing conditions. The situation escalated when a flash flood filled passages faster than they could retreat. Water rose from ankle deep to chest high in minutes. The team became trapped behind a sump, a completely flooded tunnel that blocked their exit. An air pocket provided temporary refuge but limited oxygen. Hypothermia set in as they waited in the cold water. 2 team members drowned when the air pocket was overwhelmed by rising water. Survivors experienced hallucinations and hypothermia-induced delirium as oxygen depleted. Rescue teams couldn't reach them until floodwaters receded 3 days later. Survivors described believing they would never see sunlight again. Investigation revealed rainfall 20 kilometers upstream had caused the flash flood. No early warning system existed for underground water level changes. Modern weather monitoring and communication systems were implemented following this tragedy. Survivor interviews documented the psychological trauma of believing death was certain while waiting in darkness. The survivors physically escaped, but psychologically never left that air pocket. Their minds remained trapped in those final moments of rising water. 5 cavers, 5 different fates, 5 ways that Jenolan Caves claims those who venture too deep. From obsession to accident, from ancient mystery to modern tragedy. From Wybert's phantom chamber to the flood-trapped students, these stories share a common thread. The mountain's ability to turn exploration into entrapment, adventure into nightmare. The safety barriers and guided tours aren't there to limit your experience. They're there to ensure you have an experience to remember, not one that ends in the dark. So the next time you stand at a cave entrance, remember these stories. Remember James Wybert, who spent 30 years chasing a dream that consumed him. Remember the ancient bones found in impossible places. Remember that some passages lead deeper than human preparation can follow. Which of these cases disturbed you the most? Let us know in the comments below. If you want to explore more stories of fatal obsession, make sure to like this video and subscribe to Final Moments. Until next time, stay in the light.